They say the ocean keeps secrets that no man should hear. But that night, I swear, I heard it call my name. The storm didn't roll in. It rose, like a beast waking from centuries of sleep, dragging the moon beneath its claws. I had spent my life pulling fish from its depths. But that night, it pulled something from me. The kind of night when even prayers drown. The kind that doesn't just take, it trades. The sea was my living and my punishment. I was Elijah, a fisherman from a forgotten African coast where every wave sounded like debt collecting interest. The village behind me slept under tin roofs and broken dreams, but out on the water, no one slept. The wind had turned sharp, the air electric, the kind of warning the old men read in silence. I should have turned back when the gulls fled inland, but hunger has no patience for warnings. The clouds thickened until the horizon vanished. Rain slammed down in sheets so heavy I could taste salt instead of air. My boat groaned, ropes snapping, nets thrashing against the current. Then thunder, not from the sky, but from beneath the sea, rolled through my bones. The ocean wasn't just angry, it was alive. And then I heard it. A cry. Faint, fragile, human. At first I thought it was the wind mocking me. But then it came again, a child's scream lost in the thunder. My heart stopped. There shouldn't have been anyone out here. Not this far. Not in this storm. Through the blur of rain, I saw something. A small hand, rising once, then disappearing beneath the waves. I didn't think. Thinking kills courage. I tied a rope around my waist and dove. The cold hit like knives. The sea swallowed me whole, dragging me through black water that spun the world upside down. My lungs burned, salt clawed my throat. I reached, searching through the dark, until my fingers brushed something soft. A body. Small. Still. I pulled hard, fighting the current, every kick a prayer to gods who no longer listened. When we broke the surface, the storm screamed in protest. My chest ached. I couldn't tell if the heartbeat I felt was hers or mine. The beach was chaos. Villagers shouting, torches flickering through the storm. They helped me drag her to shore. She looked like a ghost carved from moonlight, maybe 8 years old, skin pale against the black sand, her dress torn silk, soaked in seawater and gold threads. Someone pressed on her chest. I didn't breathe until she did. A tiny gasp, weak but alive. The crowd murmured, half relief, half fear. Her eyes fluttered open, eyes too blue for this earth. She stared at me, confused, trembling, then whispered one word before fainting. Alaric. It wasn't the name of anyone from our village. It sounded foreign, expensive, heavy with meaning. The elders exchanged uneasy looks. I didn't care. She was alive. That was enough. We brought her to my hut near the dunes. The storm raged all night, and I stayed awake beside her, feeding the fire, watching her chest rise and fall. Every few hours, she would mumble that name again. Alaric, like a prayer or a curse. I didn't know if it was her father, a brother, or a ghost. When dawn came, the world looked wrong. The beach was torn apart, nets ripped, boats shattered, the sea quiet like something guilty. I stepped outside to clear my head. That's when I saw it. Out beyond the reef, a shape loomed through the morning fog, massive, motionless, gleaming. Not a ship like ours, patched with wood and hope, but a floating fortress, white steel glinting in the weak sunlight. Its size dwarfed the horizon, its decks lined with glass that caught the dawn like fire. A yacht. But not just any yacht. One no fisherman had ever seen this close. It was silent, anchored like a predator waiting. And through the haze, I could see figures moving, men in dark uniforms, their eyes fixed on the shore, on me. The girl stirred behind me, whimpering in her sleep. I turned back, her small hand clutching the edge of my blanket, her lips moving faintly. "He'll come," she whispered. "He always finds me." I froze. The air thickened. The waves turned still. A flash of light cut through the fog, glinting off something metallic. Binoculars. Someone on that ship was watching my hut. I felt the weight of their gaze pierce straight through the storm's calm. Then the yacht's horn shattered the silence. Deep, commanding, final. The girl jolted awake with a scream, and through the mist, I finally saw the crest painted on the ship's hull. A crowned wave. The mark of Alaric, the billionaire of the seas. Some names don't belong to the poor. They taste like old money and command the air around them to listen. When she whispered his name, Alaric, it didn't sound like a word. It sounded like a warning the ocean itself obeyed. That night, as the rain whispered through the cracks of my roof, I realized I hadn't pulled a child from the sea. I'd pulled a story far too heavy for my hands to hold. The girl lay motionless on my cot, wrapped in the only dry blanket I owned. Her skin had the fragile glow of porcelain, her hair dark as wet sand, and her small hands clenched even in sleep, as if still fighting the storm. Beside her, a silver bracelet glimmered faintly, delicate, expensive, impossibly out of place in a fisherman's hut. Outside, the waves had quieted, but the village had not. Whispers traveled faster than the tide. By dawn, half the shore knew I had dragged a child from the sea, and by morning prayers, the other half had decided she wasn't human. She came from the deep, one of the old women hissed as I fetched water from the well. The sea doesn't give back what it takes unless it wants something in return. I ignored her, but her words followed me back to my door, like ghosts. When I returned, the girl was awake, sitting upright, her eyes wide and blue enough to drown a man, twice. She looked at me, confused but calm, her small voice barely louder than the wind. "You pulled me out," she said. "I did," I replied softly, setting down the bucket. "You almost didn't make it." Her gaze flicked to my hands, rough and cut from rope and salt. "You're kind," she whispered. "Papa says kind men belong to the sea." I smiled faintly, unsure how to respond. "And where does your papa belong?" She tilted her head, her expression thoughtful, the kind of stillness children shouldn't have. "Everywhere the water touches," she said simply. "He owns it." I froze, the words hanging between us like fog. Owns the water. It sounded like a game, a child's imagination painting her father as a god. But when I looked closer, at the stitching of her torn dress, at the shimmer of its threads, I saw something else. A golden trident embroidered near the hem, half torn, but unmistakable. I had seen that symbol before, once on the crates that washed up after a storm. Crates filled with goods no fisherman could afford, stamped with the same insignia. They said those shipments came from the sovereign fleet, ships belonging to one man, Alaric Voss, the billionaire who ruled the African seas with steel and silence. The room felt smaller suddenly. The wind outside grew heavier, pressing against the door. The girl's gaze followed mine, and she clutched the blanket closer. "You're scared," she said softly. "I'm not," I lied. She looked away, her voice fading into the crackle of the fire. "Everyone gets scared when they say his name." Her words sank deeper than the waves that had nearly claimed her. I sat in silence, staring at the golden trident as it glimmered faintly in the firelight. A mark of wealth, of power, of danger. Hours passed. The villagers came and went, bringing whispers and suspicion. Some offered food, others just questions I couldn't answer. Who was she? Where did she come from? Why had the sea chosen me to find her? When night fell again, I stepped outside to clear my head. The air was thick with salt, the kind that clings to your skin and won't let go. I looked out at the horizon, dark, endless, quiet. For the first time since the storm, I couldn't hear the waves, only the wind, low and uneasy. Then I felt it. A hum beneath my feet, faint but growing. The ground vibrated softly, the air shifting like the breath before thunder. I looked up. The horizon was changing. At first I thought it was sunrise, but the glow was wrong. Too white, too sharp. It pulsed, steady and cold, like light reflected from metal. And then, cutting through the fog, I saw it. A yacht, massive, pristine, and silent, slicing through the dark water toward the shore. Its lights burned against the sea like stars too close to Earth. The kind of ship that carried men who didn't knock. They arrived, and doors opened. The villagers gathered behind me, murmuring in awe and fear. One of the elders crossed himself. Another whispered, "It's him, the king of the ocean." I turned back toward my hut, the unease in my chest twisting into dread. The girl was standing in the doorway now, her eyes locked on the approaching ship. Her small fingers tightened around the blanket, her voice trembling. "He found me," she said. The yacht's horn split the silence, deep and commanding, echoing across the bay like a verdict. Searchlights swept the beach, bright enough to turn night into glass. Then, through the glare, I saw figures in black descending into smaller boats, armed, precise, and moving straight toward my shore. The sea had returned what it borrowed, and now it had come to collect. He didn't walk onto the dock like a man. He arrived like the tide, certain everything before him already belonged to him. The ocean bent around his ship as if it feared his silence. His shadow fell long before his footsteps reached the sand, and in that moment, every wave seemed to lower its voice. I had faced storms before, but never something this calm, this dangerous. The beach had never seen anything like it. The yacht glided to a halt, towering over the fishing boats like a ghost of another world. Its hull gleamed white under the broken sunlight, reflecting the faces of villagers who'd never seen wealth so close. Armed guards in black stepped out first, their movements rehearsed, precise, silent. Behind them came the medics, rushing toward my hut where the girl still lay half asleep. They spoke in clipped tones, their accents foreign, their hands quick and professional. The villagers parted as if making way for gods. I stood back, watching the chaos with the kind of stillness that comes only when the world has forgotten you. Then the air changed. The guards straightened. The chatter stopped. A man stepped down from the yacht, tall, composed, dressed in a storm-gray coat that looked too clean for this shore. His face was carved in calm authority, eyes pale as lightning before it strikes. Even the sea seemed to hesitate, its rhythm breaking for half a breath. Alaric Ward. I had heard his name whispered in markets and taverns, always in fear, never in person. The billionaire who built his empire on the backs of tides. They said no ship sailed his waters without paying tribute. Some called him a genius. Others called him a ghost who'd learned how to own the living. He scanned the shore once, not in curiosity, but in ownership. His gaze lingered on the villagers, on the waves, and finally, on me. "Who pulled her out?" His voice wasn't loud, yet it carried like thunder through fog. No one answered. They didn't have to. All eyes turned to me. I stepped forward slowly, unsure whether to bow or speak. "I found her near the rocks," I said quietly. "She wasn't breathing at first." He studied me, unmoving. Then, without a word, he turned toward the hut. I followed at a distance, my heartbeat outpacing the storm. Inside, the girl stirred as he knelt beside her. For the first time, the man who commanded empires looked human. He brushed a hand through her hair and whispered something too soft to hear. When he rose, he turned to me again. "You saved her life." I nodded, unsure what to say. "Anyone would have." "Not anyone," he replied, his eyes unreadable. "Most would have watched the sea take what it wanted." He reached into his coat and drew out a checkbook. Heavy paper, embossed with a crest that looked almost identical to the one on the girl's dress. "Name your price," he said simply. I froze. The villagers behind him gasped. The wind seemed to hold its breath. I looked at the child, at the salt drying on her cheeks, and then back at the man who thought the world could be bought. "You can't pay for a heartbeat," I said quietly. For the first time, something shifted in his expression. Not anger, not offense, just a faint flicker of surprise. He studied me like a man who'd discovered something he didn't understand. "You refuse me?" he asked, almost curious. "I didn't save her for a reward," I replied. "The sea gave her back. That's enough." A slow, measured silence followed. Then he smiled, not kindly, but knowingly. "You speak of the sea like it listens to you," he said. "Maybe it does," I answered, though I wasn't sure I believed it. He stepped closer, his presence carrying the cold scent of open water. "The ocean keeps what's hers, fisherman. When she takes, she means it. When she returns something, it's never a gift." I frowned, confused by his tone. "What are you saying?" He glanced at his daughter, who was now awake and watching us both. "You pulled her from the waves," he said softly. "That means you've touched what belongs to the sea." The words settled like a storm cloud between us. I didn't understand them, not then, but his eyes told me enough. He wasn't warning me. He was promising something. The medics lifted the child gently, wrapping her in thick blankets. She looked at me one last time, her lips parting in a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Goodbye, Elijah," she whispered. My chest tightened. "How do you know my name?" But she didn't answer. Alaric placed a hand on her shoulder and turned toward the dock. As the guards followed, I stood frozen in the rain that had begun to fall again. Small cold drops like the sea's unspoken farewell. At the edge of the dock, Alaric stopped and looked back. His gaze found mine, sharp and certain, as if he could see through the storm itself. "The ocean keeps what's hers," he said again, his voice barely above the wind. "You saved what she claimed. You'll see her again soon." Then he stepped aboard his ship, and within moments, the yacht vanished into the fog. But the tide didn't sound the same anymore. It whispered my name. Some storms never leave with the tide. They linger in silence, waiting for the right name to call again. I thought the sea had ended its conversation with me the night I saved that child. But mercy is never the ocean's final word. For 2 nights, the wind carried whispers across the waves, soft, haunting, like someone breathing my fate back to shore. When I finally answered that call, I realized too late. It wasn't gratitude waiting for me. It was something far older and far more dangerous. The morning after the storm, the village felt wrong. Too calm, the sky clear, the waves gentle, as if the sea had washed its hands clean of guilt. I went back to mending nets, pretending the world hadn't changed. But every time I blinked, I saw her face again, the little girl's pale lips murmuring her father's name through salt and water. Alaric. On the second night, the ocean glowed faintly under the moonlight, its surface glimmering with strange silver veins. I told myself it was moonlight. Lies are easy to believe when they feel like safety. By dawn, the horizon held a shape too white, too vast to belong to anything mortal. A ship. No, a kingdom carved from glass. It glided toward the shore like it owned every inch of sea beneath it. The villagers gathered, their whispers clinging to the mist. "They're not from our world," someone muttered. "Maybe they've come to claim what's theirs," another said. And then the boats came. Small, fast, perfect. Men in crisp white uniforms stepped onto the sand, boots sinking into mud that had never known luxury. Their faces were expressionless, movements rehearsed. One held a gold-sealed envelope in gloved hands. "Elijah Kendi?" he asked. My name sounded wrong in his mouth, too clean, too foreign. When I nodded, he extended the envelope. "By order of Mr. Alaric Ward, you are requested aboard the Trident." Requested, not invited. Requested, like property. The villagers stepped back, crossing themselves in quiet fear. My mother appeared behind them, wiping her hands on her apron. Her eyes scanned the seal, gold trident pressed into wax. the same emblem I had seen on the girl's dress. "You'll go," she said, her voice sharp as the tide. "Mother, what if it's not safe?" She touched my cheek, her palm trembling. No fisherman ever refused the sea twice. Maybe this time it brings fortune, not loss. Her words felt like a prayer trying to disguise itself as courage. That evening, I boarded their boat. The air smelled of salt, oil, and something colder, power. The sun was melting into the horizon when the Trident came into full view, towering above the water, white and endless, like a floating cathedral. As I climbed aboard, I caught my reflection in its polished metal hull, small, out of place, already swallowed by a world that didn't know how to release what it took. And then, a voice broke through the silence. "Elijah." I turned. Igla ran toward me. The same girl I had, pulled from the storm, her smile bright enough to shame the sun. She threw her arms around me, small and warm and impossibly alive. "I told Father you'd come." Her laughter eased something inside me I didn't know I'd been holding. But when I looked up, the warmth froze. Alaric Ward stood at the top of the stairs, tall, severe, and silent. His presence felt like gravity, pulling everything toward him. His suit was immaculate, but his eyes were the color of the sea when it decides to drown ships. "So," he said, voice smooth and deliberate, "you're the one who pulled my daughter from the ocean's teeth." "I did what anyone would have done," I replied quietly. "Not anyone," he said, descending slowly. "Most men don't fight the sea. They kneel before it." He stopped in front of me, his gaze steady, unreadable. "I'd like to repay you." He pulled out a checkbook, clean, white, untouched. "Name your price." I swallowed hard. "You can't pay for a heartbeat." Something flickered behind his expression. Not anger, something colder. Interest. He closed the checkbook, smiling faintly. "You're a rare man, Elijah. I'd rather keep you close than in debt." His tone made the words sound less like a compliment and more like a command. "Work aboard the Trident. My daughter seems fond of you." I hesitated. "I'm no sailor of steel ships, sir." "Then learn," he said. "The sea already knows your name." That night, my cabin door locked from the outside. The crew avoided my eyes at dinner. Isla sat with her father at the grand table, whispering something that made him smirk. The chandelier above swayed gently with the rhythm of the tide, its crystals reflecting light like captured lightning. Later, unable to sleep, I slipped out onto the deck. The moon was high, the ocean black and endless. Somewhere below, the engines hummed like a heartbeat that didn't belong to man. Then I heard voices, 2 crewmen, hidden in the shadows near the bow. "He shouldn't be here," one said. "The master has his reasons," the other replied. "He had reasons last time too," came the answer. "And none of them left this ship alive." My pulse froze. I turned toward the dark water, the yacht slicing through it like a blade. The moon's reflection rippled, breaking apart as if warning me. Somewhere in the deep, the sea whispered again. My name, soft but certain. I suddenly realized this wasn't gratitude. This was a transaction I hadn't agreed to, and the ocean had just collected its debt. Some storms ended at the shore, but mine began aboard the Trident. It wasn't a ship. It was a moving kingdom, carved from arrogance and grief, gliding over waters that still remembered screams. Every plank, every polished rail, smelled of salt and secrets. I thought I had stepped into the world of men who conquered the sea, but I was wrong. I had stepped into the heart of the storm that never ended. From the moment I boarded, the world I knew ceased to exist. The air itself carried a different weight, perfumed with money, polished with silence. The crew moved like shadows, trained to avoid eyes, to answer questions before they were asked. It felt less like service and more like obedience. There were rules here, rules that no one dared to speak aloud, but everyone knew by heart. Never step below deck 7. Never open a door that isn't yours. Never ask what lies on deck 1. They whispered these laws like prayers, not for faith, but for survival. I was given a cabin near the lower decks, small, neat, with a window that showed only the sea's endless black. The rhythm of the waves should have soothed me, but they didn't. They sounded like breathing, slow, restless, alive. Days passed under a perfect sun. Nights sank into impossible stillness. Only Isla seemed untouched by the ship's strange gravity. She ran along the decks barefoot, her laughter bright enough to make the waves listen. "You're the man who beat the sea," she told me, holding my hand like I was something safe. "Daddy says the ocean knows your name now." Her father, Alaric Ward, the man who commanded both water and men, was a presence too large to fit in silence. His shadow stretched across every wall. He spoke rarely, but when he did, people stopped breathing. And yet, for reasons I couldn't understand, he began to seek my company. Late at night, when the rest of the ship slept, he'd find me standing near the rail, eyes fixed on the black horizon. "The sea takes what she loves," he said once, his voice low, thoughtful. "And she never gives it back. But sometimes she leaves a witness behind." His gaze drifted to the dark water below, and for the first time, I saw something fragile in him, grief wrapped in gold. He told me of his wife, how she'd drowned on a night just like the one I'd saved Isla. "The sea took her," he whispered, "but not her memory. I built the trident so she could never be forgotten." It was the kind of confession that felt too personal to hear, and yet too dangerous to ignore. When I returned to my cabin that night, I noticed something strange. The floor beneath me trembled faintly, like a heartbeat beneath the boards. At first I thought it was the engines, but the rhythm wasn't mechanical. It pulsed like something alive. Then came the sounds, low, metallic, irregular, like chains dragged across the belly of the ship. When I asked a crewman about it, his expression collapsed into fear. "Don't listen to it," he whispered, "and don't go below." But how could I not? The deeper the silence grew, the louder the sound became. A week later, during a dinner hosted by Alaric, I noticed something carved faintly into the base of his wine glass, a trident symbol identical to the one I'd seen on Isla's torn dress. Its tips shimmered faintly in the candlelight. When I looked up, Alaric was already watching me, a thin smile tracing his lips. That night, I couldn't sleep. Curiosity is a cruel tide. Once it drags you under, there's no coming up for air. I followed the hum through the ship's spine, past the glittering halls and sleeping cabins. The corridors grew darker with every step, the air colder, heavier. The noise grew louder as I descended the spiral stairs to deck 7. Beyond that, no light remained, only a narrow corridor leading into the ship's core. The walls dripped with condensation. Every footstep echoed like an intrusion. And then I found it. A steel door, massive and cold, engraved with that same trident. But this one pulsed softly, as though it were breathing. The symbol's glow cast faint blue light across the walls, rippling like underwater fire. I reached out to touch it. The metal burned against my skin, warm, alive, almost human. And beneath the hum of the engines, I could swear I heard something else. Not a voice, a whisper. My name. Elijah. My hand froze. My heart stopped. The glow brightened, and the door groaned softly as if exhaling. I stumbled back, pulse hammering, breath shallow. Before I could run, a shadow filled the corridor. The glow of a lantern cut through the darkness, steady and cold. "Elijah," a voice said behind me, calm, unhurried, unmistakable. I turned. Alaric stood barefoot on the steel floor, his eyes reflecting the same faint blue light. "You shouldn't have come here," he said softly. "Now the sea will decide if she still wants you." Some depths were never meant to be seen. The sea keeps its dead for a reason, because what it holds is not just memory, but madness. Alaric's eyes had always reminded me of the ocean at midnight, beautiful, unending, and merciless. When he said, "Now the sea will decide if she still wants you," I didn't understand he meant it literally. I thought I was trespassing into his secrets. I didn't know I was stepping into his grief. He didn't move closer right away. He just stood in the dim blue light, the air vibrating with something that didn't belong to the living. The trident on the door pulsed faintly behind me, and every beat felt like a warning. "What's down here?" I asked quietly, my voice thin against the low hum of machines. Alaric's expression didn't change. "Truth," he said. Then softer, "But truth costs more than curiosity can afford." He turned to the panel beside the door and pressed his palm against it. The metal hissed, gears unlocking like a giant exhaling its secrets. With a slow creak, the door began to open, releasing a gust of air colder than death. I should have run. Instead, I followed. Inside, the light changed. It wasn't the cold blue of the ship. It was deeper, stranger, like light filtered through miles of seawater. The walls glimmered faintly, lined with glass that seemed to breathe. For a heartbeat, I thought it was reflection. Then the glass moved, and saw them. Figures, dozens of them. Men, women, children, all suspended inside tall glass tanks filled with translucent fluid. Their bodies shimmered faintly, flickering in and out of focus, as if caught between existence and memory. I stepped closer, my breath freezing in my chest. They weren't corpses. They weren't alive either. They were projections, holograms, built of light and sound, each one echoing the faint vibration of sonar waves pulsing through the room. Their faces were peaceful, their eyes closed. The light rippled across their forms like moonlight through deep water. I realized then that the hum I'd been hearing all along, the pulse beneath the ship, was coming from here, from them. Each tank had a name engraved into the steel base, dates, coordinates, all marked with the same phrase, "Taken by the sea." "This is what the ocean gives back," Alaric said behind me, his voice steady but hollow. "They say the dead are lost to the depths, but I found a way to make the sea remember." I turned to him, my throat dry. "You built this?" He nodded once. Every sonar ping, every distress signal, every final breath that vanished beneath the waves, I captured them, fed them into memory. The trident doesn't just sail, it listens, and the sea speaks. I stared at the rows of glass, unable to comprehend what kind of grief could drive a man to trap echoes of the dead. "You turned the ocean into a tomb," I whispered. He looked away. "No, into a promise." Then he stopped before one of the larger tanks, the only one that shimmered brighter than the rest. The figure inside was a woman, her hair floating like dark silk, her dress pure white. Her hand was lifted slightly, as though reaching for the surface. "My wife," Alaric said softly. "Lydia." Something in his voice broke, a tremor no storm could hide. "The sea took her 5 years ago. I built the trident to find her. I mapped every wreck, every current, every sound the water remembered. And one night, she answered." I stared at the holographic figure, her image flickering in rhythm with the sonar hum. "You mean this isn't a recording?" "She speaks," he murmured. "Sometimes only to me. Sometimes to the waves." He placed his palm on the glass, and for an instant, the projection blinked. The woman's eyes opened. I stumbled back, choking on disbelief. Her lips moved silently at first, then sound emerged. Not words, just a tone, a melody like the hum of deep currents. It reverberated through my chest, vibrating in my bones. Alaric's eyes shone with tears. "She's trapped in the current between life and death. The sea won't release her, but she's still there, listening." I wanted to step closer, to believe him, but the closer I got, the colder the air became. The light around the tanks dimmed, the hum turned discordant, and suddenly the woman's head tilted, as if she'd noticed me. Her gaze met mine, and for one impossible second, I swear she whispered my name. Elijah. The sound wasn't from the speakers. It was inside my head. I stumbled backward, the world spinning, my skin prickling with panic. How does she know me? Alaric didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was distant, as if from somewhere below the water. Because the sea remembers everyone it touches, he said. Even the ones who think they escaped. He turned toward me slowly, eyes dark and unreadable. You've seen my curse, he whispered, stepping closer. Now you'll help me undo it. Before I could respond, the glass tanks began to glow brighter, the figures inside shifting, restless. The hum deepened into something almost like a heartbeat, and through the rising noise, I heard the impossible again. Dozens of voices, all whispering the same name. Mine. The ocean doesn't forgive curiosity. It swallows it whole. The deeper you go, the more it stops feeling like water and starts feeling like memory. I used to think drowning was silence. But when Alaric told me we were going to meet his dead wife beneath the waves, I realized the sea doesn't take your breath. It replaces it with secrets. That night, when he said, "We dive at dawn," it wasn't an order. It was a sentence. The storm had passed, but the air still smelled of salt and sorrow. The Trident's deck gleamed under a pale moon, its surface slick as glass. Alaric stood at the bow, a black silhouette against a sea that never truly slept. I watched him, the way he stared at the horizon as if it owed him something. Maybe it did. He turned when he heard my steps. You saw her, he said quietly, no accusation in his tone, just certainty. Now you understand why we can't stop here. What are you planning? I asked, though part of me already knew. He looked down at the water, voice low and steady. We're going to her, to the wreck, to bring her home. The words should have sounded insane, but the conviction in his eyes made them feel inevitable. He moved toward the diving gear, sleek and heavy, lined with silver tubing that hummed faintly with oxygen. You're coming with me, he added, not as a request, but as destiny. I froze. I'm not a diver, he smiled faintly. Neither was I once. But love teaches you how to breathe where others drown. Behind us, Idla's small voice broke the air. Papa, please don't go. Alaric's gaze softened, pain flickering through his composure. He knelt, taking her trembling hands in his. The sea took your mother, Isla. I must take her back. The child clutched his wrist, her eyes glistening. But it always takes you too. He hesitated, then kissed her forehead. Not this time. But even he didn't believe that. By dawn, the world was gray and waiting. The diving suits hung like ghosts on the rail, the sea below them whispering promises it had no intention of keeping. Alaric handed me my helmet. The glass faceplate reflected a version of me I didn't recognize, half man, half offering. When we dropped into the water, the world inverted. Light vanished. The surface above shimmered like a dying memory, shrinking fast. The deeper we sank, the colder it became, until even my heartbeat felt muted by the pressure. Alaric swam ahead, his flashlight cutting thin gold ribbons through the black. Stay close, his voice crackled through the calm. She's waiting below. I wanted to ask who he meant, the woman or the sea, but the words died in my throat. The water around us pulsed faintly, alive with sound, low frequencies echoing like distant voices. The deeper we went, the louder they grew, whispering through the metal of my helmet. Then I saw it. The wreck. It loomed from the darkness like a cathedral built for ghosts, its hull torn open, its bones draped in coral. Schools of silver fish darted between shattered windows. Long ribbons of seaweed curled through the air like forgotten prayers. And in the center of it all, illuminated by Alaric's light, rested what looked like a glass coffin. Inside it, perfectly preserved, was a woman. Her hair floated like ink, her dress white as the moon, her face untouched by time. She looked asleep, peaceful, eternal. Alaric drifted toward her, every movement reverent, like a worshipper before an altar. "Lydia," he whispered, his voice trembling through the calm. "I'm bringing you home." He placed his gloved hand against the glass. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the sensors on our suits flickered. My heartbeat monitor spiked. Hers did too. I blinked, staring at the faint pulse that glowed on the coffin's interface. "Alaric, there's a movement." He didn't respond. His eyes were wide, his breathing ragged. "She's alive," he breathed. "The sea kept her alive." "Alaric, stop!" But he pressed a command on his wrist panel. The locks on the coffin hissed, releasing a stream of bubbles as the lid began to open. The ocean howled around us, a sound too deep to be natural. "Close it!" I shouted. "The pressure!" The coffin burst open. The current slammed us backward, blinding me with silt and debris. The world spun, metal groaning, lights dying. Through the chaos, I caught one impossible glimpse, the woman's eyes opening, glowing faintly blue in the darkness. The sea itself shivered. As we rose through the churning black, the current turned violent, dragging at our legs like hands made of water. My vision blurred. My lungs screamed for air. Through the reflection on my visor, I saw her again, her face on the surface above, watching us ascend. Her lips moved, forming words the water carried like a curse. "Elijah." The surface broke over us in a storm of light, and the ocean whispered back. Some loves don't rest beneath the waves. They wait. They whisper through the currents, calling back the ones who dared to move on. Alaric used to say the sea remembered everything it touched, and that memory was the cruelest kind of love. I once thought the ocean only drowned bodies. That night, I learned it could drown souls, and drag them back when the living refused to let go. The wind had died completely, but the silence that followed was worse. The yacht drifted under a moon the color of steel, and every light aboard seemed dimmer, as if afraid to burn too bright in the sea's stare. Alaric stood at the bow, his clothes still wet, his eyes fixed on the black horizon like a priest awaiting judgment. Isla slept below deck, her small breaths the only proof that innocence still lived aboard the Trident. When I joined him, he didn't turn. He was murmuring something into the night, words too soft for prayer, too heavy for sanity. "Who are you talking to?" I asked. He exhaled slowly, almost tenderly. "To her. She listens better than the living do." I followed his gaze toward the water, and for a moment I saw it, just beneath the rippling surface, a faint shimmer, like a face that hadn't learned how to stay buried. My pulse stilled. "It's just the reflection," I said quickly. He smiled without warmth. "Reflection is what the guilty call remembrance." I wanted to walk away, to blame grief for the madness in his eyes. But part of me wondered, what if the sea did remember? What if it was never meant to return what it took, yet we forced it to? The next morning, the crew whispered in corners. Their eyes avoided Alaric's, their movements stiff, ritualistic. The storm had passed, but something heavier had settled over the vessel, an invisible weight pressing from every direction. When I asked one of the older sailors what was happening, he only muttered, "The sea don't like to be robbed twice." By dusk, Alaric summoned me to his private quarters. The room was colder than before, though the windows were sealed. On the table lay an old nautical journal, its pages swollen from years of salt. He didn't look up when I entered. "I need your help," he said finally, his voice stripped of command. "To finish what you started." "What I started?" "You pulled her back from death's mouth," he whispered. "You took what the ocean claimed. Now it's coming for balance." I stepped back, shaking my head. "You can't believe that." He turned to me, and for the first time, I saw tears cutting through the salt on his face. "The sea is alive, Elijah. It bargains. It remembers. It took my wife. I offered myself, but it spared me. Then you—" He paused, eyes trembling. "You broke the vow. Someone must pay for that mercy." The words hung in the air like thunder that hadn't yet struck. "You're talking about superstition," I said. About guilt. He stepped closer, his shadow swallowing mine. I'm talking about survival. That night, Isla found me on the lower deck. Her small hands were cold, her voice smaller. Still. He's not sleeping anymore, she whispered. He talks to the water. It answers him. Her fear was enough to send ice through my blood. Stay in your cabin, I told her. Lock the door. No matter what happens, don't come out. She hesitated, then clutched my hand. Promise me you won't let him go into the sea again. I wanted to promise, but promises mean nothing when the waves decide otherwise. The hours stretched like years. The ship creaked and groaned as though something vast moved beneath it. At midnight, the bells rang, not from the tower, but from below. Their echo rose through the hull like a heartbeat. I climbed the steps, breath ragged, and when I reached the main deck, I froze. The crew stood in a wide circle, torches in hand, faces blank and eyes distant. Their lips moved in rhythm, words too ancient to belong to men. And in the center stood Alaric, bare-chested, a length of rope in his hands, the storm lantern glowing beside his feet. He looked at me, not with anger, not even hatred, but something far more terrible. Peace. It's not your fault, he said softly, but it has to be you. The men moved forward. Hands grabbed my arms, my shoulders, their touch cold and mechanical. I struggled, shouted his name, but he didn't flinch. The chanting grew louder, blending with the groan of the sea as the tide climbed the sides of the ship. Water poured through the drains, flooding the deck until we stood ankle-deep in the ocean itself. Alaric lifted his hands toward the black sky. Take what you're owed, he whispered. Let my family live. The sea answered. It rose, not in waves, but in a single colossal wall of water, alive with light and fury. The ropes snaked tighter around my wrists, salt stinging my skin. The wind screamed through the sails, and the deck tilted beneath us like a dying heart. Alaric's voice was the last thing I heard before the world vanished into foam. The sea never forgets its debt. Some storms return not to punish, but to reclaim what they once spared. The first time I drowned, the sea took my fear. The second, she came for my soul. I used to believe dying was an ending, but that night, I learned it was only an invitation to a place where breath and memory trade places, and mercy learns how to drown. The waves didn't want my life. They wanted my surrender. The night was silent before the ritual began, too silent for a living ocean. The crew surrounded me on the upper deck, their eyes glazed, their voices trembling with chants that belonged to another age. The ropes cut into my wrists, salt burned through open skin. Alaric stood at the helm like a preacher before his altar, the storm rising behind him, his words breaking through the thunder. The sea takes what she's owed. His voice was not a command. It was confession. The wind howled around him as if answering a vow he should never have spoken. I caught one last glimpse of Isla. Through the cabin window, her face pale, her hands pressed to the glass. She mouthed a single word I could barely see. Run. But there was no place left to run. The deck tilted, and the next moment, I was flying backward into darkness. The ocean opened beneath me like a mouth hungry for memory. The fall was endless. A plunge through thunder and rain, through cold so sharp it felt like glass breaking against my bones. The impact came like fire, disguised as ice, and then everything went still. The sound of the world disappeared. No waves, no wind, no screams, just silence. Deep, endless, absolute. I opened my eyes and the water was no longer dark. It shimmered faintly, alive with soft light rising from below, as if the sea itself had veins and I was being pulled through them. Then I saw her. A woman's figure moved through the current, her hair fanning like smoke, her gown of white drifting weightless around her. Her face was pale, almost luminescent, her eyes closed as though dreaming. Alaric's wife, the woman he had drowned trying to resurrect. When her eyes opened, The light dimmed around us. Her gaze met mine, steady, mournful, eternal. I tried to speak, but no sound came. Yet her voice found me, not through words, but through the water itself. "He loved me too much to let me rest," she whispered. "And now, love has turned to debt." Her hand reached toward me, pale and trembling. The current wrapped around us, drawing me closer despite every ounce of strength I tried to summon. The water between us pulsed like a heartbeat. "You're not dead," I thought. Or maybe I prayed. "No," her voice echoed. "I am what his grief made of me." Visions flooded the depths, the trident swallowed by waves, Alaric standing alone on its burning deck, his eyes hollow as he watched the ocean rise to meet him. The sea's voice joined hers, whispering through every drop around me. One must stay for the other to rise. I shook my head, panic clawing inside my chest. "No," I tried to scream, but bubbles carried my words away. She touched my shoulder, and the water around us pulsed with light so bright it burned through the dark. Then, stillness. My lungs didn't hurt. My body stopped fighting. The sea's weight pressed gently instead of crushing, her current turning soft, almost tender. I wasn't breathing, but I wasn't dying. The boundary between life and the ocean blurred until I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. In that silence, I understood. This was not punishment. It was inheritance. The woman smiled faintly, her expression like a prayer half remembered. "Tell him I forgive him," she said, her voice fading. "Tell him mercy doesn't end where drowning begins." Her hand released me, and light erupted all around. The current shifted, spinning me upward, faster, faster, until I broke through the surface gasping, coughing, alive. The storm was gone. The sky was gray and endless. The yacht gone. The world different. I floated for what felt like hours until waves carried me toward the faint outline of land. The sand met me gently, the tide curling around my legs as if guiding me ashore. Every breath burned, but the air smelled of something new, salt and memory, not fear. I lay there on the beach, my body trembling, my mind silent. When I finally looked down, the ropes that had bound me were gone, but faint white marks circled my wrists, glowing softly beneath the fading sun. The horizon rippled like a mirage, and for the briefest second, I thought I saw her standing there, in the shallows, her white gown drifting in the tide. I blinked, and she was gone, leaving only the whisper of waves and the sound of my own breath. The sea had given me back to the shore, but her touch still lived beneath my skin. I wasn't sure if I'd survived her, or become part of her. The sea has a memory sharper than time itself. It remembers the hands that defied it, the hearts that begged it for mercy, and the souls it chose not to keep. When I woke upon her shore for the second time, I knew I had not escaped her. I had been returned, like a letter sent back unread. Every breath tasted of salt and sorrow. Every heartbeat echoed with the sound of waves crashing somewhere far too close. The sea hadn't spared me out of grace. She had something left to say, and I was the only one left to hear it. I awoke beneath a roof that smelled of smoke and brine, my lungs aching as if the ocean still clung to them. The sound of waves rolled faintly outside, steady and patient, like something waiting for me to remember what it had done. My fingers dug into the coarse mat beneath me. It was warm, real, a feeling that shouldn't have been possible for a man who had drowned twice. A voice broke through the haze, low, weathered, full of kindness. "You should not be alive," it said. I turned my head. A woman sat beside me, her dark skin gleaming in the firelight, her eyes lined with both wisdom and exhaustion. "The tide threw you onto the rocks 3 nights ago. You've been breathing salt ever since." I tried to speak, but my voice was gravel. "Was there anyone else? A ship?" She shook her head slowly. "No ships, no men, just you." Her words cut colder than the ocean wind seeping through the walls. I could still see the fire, the chanting, the moment I was pulled under by hands that belonged to both men and sea. I could still hear Alaric's voice, whispering his curse to the waves. The woman reached for something on the floor, a bundle wrapped tightly in oilskin. This was beside you when we found you. We did not open it. It has your name carved inside. My pulse faltered. My name, carved. I took the bundle with trembling hands. The wrapping was slick with dried salt, and within it lay a small sealed metal case, engraved with a trident crowned in silver. Alaric's mark. The moment I opened it, the smell of the sea deepened, not foul, but ancient. Inside was a single letter, folded with precision, untouched by water, though the ocean itself had tried to claim it. The ink was dark, the handwriting careful, the kind of hand that belonged to a man who expected his words to outlive him. If you're reading this, the sea has finished what I began. I've gone to where she waits, not to be forgiven, but to be claimed. My daughter lives because of you. Protect her when the sea remembers her name. I could feel my heartbeat in my palms. The next lines were written heavier, the pen biting into the paper. I have failed to keep my promise. The ocean doesn't release its debts, it trades them. And now, Elijah, it has traded me for you. I froze. The words blurred, swimming in front of my eyes. My throat went dry as I reached the final sentence, shorter, final, cruel in its calmness. The sea belongs to you now. The room seemed to shrink around me. The waves outside grew louder, their rhythm syncing with my pulse. I could almost hear her whispering through the cracks in the walls. Mine. The woman noticed the tremor in my hands. You should rest, she said gently, touching my shoulder. The sea has already taken enough from you. But that was the thing. She hadn't taken me. She had returned to me. And things the ocean returns never come back unchanged. When the night came, I walked to the shoreline, the sand cool and damp beneath my bare feet. The horizon stretched black and endless, but the sea glowed faintly. A strange shimmer beneath the water, like moonlight caught in motion. I stood there, clutching the letter, the salt wind stinging my eyes. Why me? I whispered into the darkness. Why not finish what you started? The tide rose a little higher, brushing against my knees. It wasn't violent. It was patient, deliberate, almost tender. The waves rolled in again, and this time I heard it clearly. Not a crash, not a hiss, but a word. Return. I stumbled back, my breath catching. The sea's whisper was low, melodic, and undeniably human, the voice of something that remembered me too well. Then, in the distance, the horizon began to glow. Not white like lightning, blue, steady, unnatural. I blinked through the mist. The light pulsed again, and slowly, a shadow emerged from beneath the waves. The trident. Its hull gleamed ghost-pale beneath the surface, its masts reaching upward like bones of something that refused to die. The ship that should have sunk to silence was alive, breathing, glowing faintly from within, like a beast watching from below. The lights flickered. 1, 2, 3, like a signal. My heart thudded in the same rhythm, the same beat I had heard underwater before blacking out. The ocean stretched before me, calm, but listening. The letter in my hand felt heavier, as though the ink itself pulsed with Alaric's voice. Behind me, the wind whispered my name. Ahead, the water answered it. I knew then. The sea hadn't spared me out of kindness. It had chosen me as its next command. And as the trident's glow deepened beneath the waves, I realized the storm had never left at all. It had only changed its shape. Some inherit crowns of gold. I inherited an ocean that refuses to forget. It waited for me in every tide, whispered in every wave, called my name through every gust of salt-soaked wind. I thought the sea had taken enough, my fear, my sleep, my innocence. But I was wrong. Mercy, it seemed, was never the end of her story. It was the beginning of her claim. It began 3 weeks after the night I was dragged from her arms. The village had started to forget the storm, but the sea hadn't. Every dawn, I'd walk the shore and find the same thing waiting: a broken shell, a tangled rope, or a scrap of metal that shimmered faintly like something that remembered fire. Then came the man in the white suit. He arrived at noon, stepping out of a polished motorboat that looked absurd against our wooden docks. His shoes didn't belong here, nor did the way he moved, like a man who had spent his life walking marble, not mud. The villagers gathered in silence, their eyes wary. He adjusted his silver cufflinks, nodded politely, and said my name as if he'd rehearsed it. Elijah Nuru. I nodded, the sound of my name strange in his mouth. I represent the estate of Mr. Alaric Ward. For a moment I forgot how to breathe. The name hit like lightning, bright, sharp, unreal. He's dead, I said quietly. The man's eyes softened, but not with sorrow. Mr. Ward is gone. But before he left, he ensured his affairs were sealed by law and oath. He opened a waterproof case, revealing papers embossed with the golden trident, the same emblem burned into my memory. According to this, you have been named the inheritor of the Ward Maritime Group, all fleets, holdings, and coastal assets under his command. The world tilted. The villagers murmured. Someone gasped. I stared at the pages, the ink gleaming faintly in the sunlight, and shook my head. This is madness. I'm a fisherman. I don't own ships. I chase them for scraps. The lawyer didn't flinch. He said you'd say that. He pulled another envelope from the case, this one sealed in wax. He also said this might change your mind. My hands trembled as I broke the seal. Inside was a single note, written in the same slanted hand I'd seen on the letter that came with his final message. The ocean belongs to those who listen. You did. That's why she spared you, and why she'll follow you now. Take what I could not command. Guard her as I failed to. The sea doesn't forgive, Elijah, but sometimes she remembers gratitude. I folded the note slowly, my throat tight. The words felt alive, not ink, but breath. Behind me, I could feel the villagers' eyes, fear, envy, confusion. To them, it was a miracle. To me, it was a sentence written in water. The lawyer cleared his throat. There is one more matter. His daughter Isla requested to speak with you personally. She is waiting aboard your new vessel, the Guardian. My heart stumbled. She's alive. He nodded. Quite alive, and very insistent. I went, not because I wanted to, but because the sea demanded it. The Guardian was nothing like the Trident. Where Alaric's yacht had gleamed with arrogance, this one breathed quiet purpose. No gold, no polish, only white sails and dark wood that smelled of rain and salt. I found Isla standing at the bow, her hair caught in the wind, her small hands gripping the rails like she was holding on to memory itself. She turned when she heard my footsteps. I knew you'd come, she said softly. I knelt beside her. Why am I here, Isla? Why would your father? Because he trusted you, she said, cutting through my words with a calm too old for her years. He said you loved the sea, not what it gives. That's the only kind of love the ocean understands. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The horizon stretched before us, endless, glowing faintly with the light of dusk. Somewhere beneath those waves, the past was still moving, still breathing. Isla, I said quietly, I don't know how to be what he was. She smiled, a small knowing smile. Then be what he wasn't. The wind carried her words into the sails, and for a second, the ropes shivered as though the ship itself had understood. By sundown, I had signed the papers. The fleet, the fortune, the burden. All of it was mine now. The villagers celebrated, calling it a blessing. But as the stars rose, I couldn't help but feel the air grow heavier, the waves louder. That night, In my cabin aboard the Guardian, I sat by the window and watched the sea. She was calm, too calm, the kind of stillness that isn't peace, but patience. I closed my eyes, exhaustion pulling at me, and the memory of Alaric's voice filled the silence. It wasn't a memory. It was him. The voice came not from dreams, but from the walls themselves. Low, rippling, carried through the sound of waves brushing the hull. "Keep her calm," it murmured, familiar and hollow, "or she'll come for what she's owed." I froze, breath caught between fear and belief, as the water against the ship began to rise in slow, deliberate rhythm, like a heartbeat too large to belong to anything human. And beneath it all, faint but certain, the sea whispered back my name, Elijah. They say time heals, but the sea doesn't keep time. It keeps promises. It remembers every voice that ever cried beneath it, every mercy that ever defied its pull. Years can pass, kingdoms can sink, but the ocean forgets neither kindness nor sin. I used to believe I had escaped her depths. Now I know I only rose high enough for her to watch me longer. The sea remembers, always. And one day, she whispers, she will call my name again. It has been 12 years since the trident vanished into her own reflection. 12 years since I woke up on that nameless shore, lungs burning with the taste of borrowed mercy. The world has changed since then. The tides no longer roar for war. The coast no longer mourns its drowned. But every calm carries a silence too heavy to be called peace. I am no longer Elijah, the fisherman. The villagers call me the keeper. The title came from gratitude, but sometimes it feels more like a chain. I rebuilt what Alaric destroyed. Rescue stations along the shore, lights that never go dark, watchtowers that listen to the sea instead of fearing it. Every time the wind begins to turn, my men prepare the boats, not to hunt, but to save. And every time we pull another soul from the waves, I feel her watching. The ocean, patient, unblinking, remembering what she gave me, and what I still owe. They tell stories now, about the storm that made a poor man master of a dead man's empire, about how the sea herself crowned him in foam and thunder. Children laugh when they say my name, not realizing that every rescue I lead is an apology whispered into the water. At night, when the world goes still, I walk the shoreline alone. The air smells like salt and unfinished stories. The waves glow faintly beneath the moon, carrying a pulse that matches my own. Sometimes I see shapes in the foam. A woman's hand, a child's silhouette, a face half-formed by memory. And sometimes, when the wind is cruel enough, I hear her voice. Papa, Isla's voice, faint, soft, carried through the surf. It never calls for me, only for him. She's grown now, hidden away in one of the coastal manors that bears her father's name. But on the nights when thunder rolls over the horizon, I know she feels it too. The pull, the memory, the sea calling through blood and bone. She once told me she dreams of her father standing on the deck of the Trident, smiling, as if waiting for her to follow. I told her not to listen. But I know the sea never stops whispering to those she's touched. Sometimes, when I walk near the water, I see them, faint symbols glowing beneath the waves. The trident crest, burning gold for an instant before fading into blue. The same mark once stitched into Isla's torn dress. The same one that sealed Alaric's curse. The ocean is quiet, but not empty. It hums with memory, of the man who challenged her, of the woman who drowned to stay faithful, and of me, the fool who thought he could separate mercy from the storm. I keep her calm the only way I know how, by serving her. Every storm, I send men into the surf to rescue the lost. Every drowning I prevent, every life I pull back from her depths, feels like an offering she accepts. For now. But I know this bargain has no end. The ocean doesn't forget debts. She just waits for the right tide to collect them. Once, a boy I saved asked me why I always stand in the rain after the storm passes. I told him, "Because the sea talks then." He laughed, thinking I meant the wind. But what I hear isn't wind. It's a heartbeat beneath the waves. The same one that pulsed through the Trident's hull the night Alaric called her name. And, sometimes, I answer. Last winter, during the fiercest storm we'd faced in years, I saw something no man should see twice. The horizon split in lightning, and for a moment I saw her. The Trident, whole again, sails billowing in the rain, her deck bathed in gold light. And standing at the helm, untouched by time, was Alaric Ward, eyes bright, face calm, his hand raised in silent command. But it wasn't me he was calling. It was the sea. The vision faded as quickly as it came, leaving only waves that glowed faintly where the ship had been. My men said it was lightning. I said nothing. Some truths belong only to those the ocean spares twice. Now, as I stand on the same shore where it all began, the tide hums a tune I've come to know too well. The sound is not cruel, not angry. It's lonely. The sea is tired of keeping secrets, and I think deep down, she's waiting for me to finish the story we started together. I have no fear left, no greed, no illusion that I was ever the master of anything. I was just a man the sea remembered, and she, in her strange mercy, never forgets her choice. When the sea comes for me again, I won't fight her. I'll walk into her arms as one walks into a long-forgotten home, because this time she won't be speaking, she'll be remembering. And when she does, the tides will rise, not to drown me, but to carry me back to where mercy first learned my name. If this story made your heart listen to the sound of the sea, don't let it end here. Tell me in the comments what you think the ocean remembers. Every like, every word you share keeps these tides of stories alive. Subscribe for more tales where mercy meets destiny, and where every storm hides a heartbeat waiting to be heard.